Okay, so I'm Rahul Saha, and today we'll be discussing about the female vagina. We had discussed about the specificities of, you can say, the endometrial lining, the stratum functionalis, and the also stratum basilia. And I told you that the stratum functionalis is what gets completely washed off during the menstrual cycle of the or the menstrual phase of the menstrual cycle, and the stratum functionalis of the cervix. Good evening, Vanshika. So today we'll be talking about the menstrual cycle and also the female genitalia. Okay, so in the last class we had talked about the specificities regarding the stratum functionalis, the stratum bacillus, and I told you that the stratum functionalis of the cervix, it does not get washed off, but the stratum functionalis present in the body part, okay, of the endometrial lining. It gets washed off during the menstrual cycle, and we had talked about the various diseases like endometriosis. We had talked about the prolapsed uterus. So coming to the main structure of the female genitalia, which is the vagina. So a vagina is a 10 centimeter or 4-inch long tube that lies between that lies between the urinary bladder and rectum. Okay, 10 centimeter. If you talk about vagina, it's a 10 centimeter. Okay, or you can say 4-inch long tube that is present between the urinary bladder and rectum. Between urinary bladder and rectum. Now, it functions as a passageway for the menstrual flow, but also as a receptacle for the penis during the coitus also. Okay, and is also a part of the birth canal. Okay, now the wall of the vagina has various folds that allow it to stretch during coitus and also childbirth. Okay, and it is normally collapsed in the, you can say, during the specific cycle. Okay, during the relaxation period it is usually collapsed. Now the vaginal canal, you can say, canal leads to the vulva. This is known as the external genitalia or also the external cervical os. Okay, the vaginal canal leads to the, or it leads from the vulva, you can say, to the external cervical os. Then the opening of the external cervical os into the vagina is, you can say, circumscribed by a recess. This is known as the fornix. Okay, the recess allows support for a diaphragm contraceptive also. Okay, so the opening of the external cervical os into the vagina is, you can say, circumscribed by a recess known as the fornix. Known as the fornix, which is also the region to which the diaphragm contraceptive is held. Okay. Now, a cross section, if you check, okay, through the vaginal canal, it shows three layers. Okay, the layer next to the lumen, which is the interior space of the vagina, is known as the tunica mucosa. That is the deepest layer, you can say. It has three layers, very, very important. Number one is tunica mucosa. Okay, just surrounding the lumen. Okay, this layer includes the epithelial lining of the vagina. Okay, which consists of many squamous epithelial cells. Squamous means flattened cells. Epithelial lining of the vagina that contains squamous epithelial cells. Okay. Next up, this layer also expands under the influence of estrogen and undergoes hormone induced changes in thickness, and also one more thing I'll tell you, in storing content of carbohydrate like glycogen during the menstrual cycle. Great point. This is as far as the NEET examination is concerned. So this layer expands under the influence of estrogen, okay, and undergoes hormone induced changes in thickness and glycogen content during the menstrual cycle. So glycogen is a stored form of carbohydrate, a polymer, right? Thickness and glycogen content, okay, during the menstrual cycle. Now, these changes can be detected, okay. If you want to detect these changes, you can swab the lining and look at the cells under the microscope also in the lab, which is a procedure known as the vaginal smear. You can just take a smear, just swab it and visualize it under the microscope, okay. Now, underlying the epithelium in the tunica mucosa is a layer of dense connective tissue that is rich in elastic fibers. Just underneath the tunica mucosa, sorry, just underneath, underlying the tunica mucosa is a layer of dense connective tissue made up of elastic fibers, okay, made up of elastic fibers, and this elastic fibers is made up of the specific protein known as elastin. You have three types of fiber in connective tissue. You have the collagen fibers, you have the reticular fibers, you have the elastic fibers. It's made up of protein elastin. Then what will happen is these fibers would generally cause what? It will cause expansion of the vaginal wall, okay. It also contains an extensive network of thin walled veins also. Due to the presence of elastin, it causes the, you can say, expansion of the vaginal wall whenever needed, of the vaginal wall. So now next up is, it is thought that the fluid from these blood vessels seeps through the epithelium into the vaginal canal during any kind of sexual arousal, which has a specific, you can say, purpose, that is to lubricate the vagina. Okay, still research is going on, but this is the, you can say, the specific hypothesis. Now we come to the middle layer. Now we have completed the innermost layer, that is the tunica mucosa and its underlying elastic fiber dense connective tissue. Now the middle layer is known as tunica muscularis, means muscle, the smooth muscles. Now we have the middle layer, which is known as tunica muscularis, okay. So as the name suggests, as the name indicates, it contains numerous bundles of smooth muscles that are embedded in connective tissue. It contains numerous bundles of smooth muscles that are embedded in connective tissue. Okay. Now, There is also a sphincter of skeletal muscles at the vaginal opening, which is under the voluntary control. Sphincter means valve. It is under the voluntary control. Sphincter is also present. It's under voluntary control. Okay. Now the tunica muscularis is then surrounded by the outermost layer, which is a very thin layer known as the tunica adventitia. Okay. Now the layer number 3 is tunica adventitia. Okay, that is the good evening. Okay, Tarun. So that is known as tunica adventitia. Now this tunica adventitia does what? This is made up of mainly the elastic connective fibers again, which supports the nerve bundles, okay, which control, or most of which you can say control the blood flow and the smooth muscle contraction of the vaginal tissue. So it contains the elastic fibers and mainly the nerves, the nerve bundles, the autonomic nerve fibers, right? That would control the, you can say, blood flow and smooth muscle contraction of the vaginal tissue. And smooth muscle contraction of the vaginal tissue. Now, when we talk about the vaginal environment, so the vagina is the natural home for several microorganisms. Some of these could be bacteria, fungi, and protozoa also, which play pivotal roles in maintaining the vaginal environment. Okay, so it has got its own microbiota, which can contain bacteria, it can contain even fungi, it can contain even protozoans. Just like the colon, okay, of the large intestine. Now, there could be various potentially deadly microorganisms which would also be present, okay, but they do not cause problems unless they multiply rapidly, okay. And some of these microorganisms can be sexually transmitted also, that we will be talking about in the STD, you can say, section, that is the sexually transmitted diseases, okay. Now, cells of the vaginal epithelium that I told you, they do contain, okay, or they do accumulate large amounts of glycogen under the influence of estrogen that I just told you. The cells of the vagina, they do contain the large or a large, or they accumulate large amounts of glycogen under the influence of estrogen. Now as these cells die, okay, and sloughed off into the vaginal cavity, they release this glycogen. This is the mechanism, okay, of the tunica mucosa. As the cells from the layer, inner layer, they die, okay, they will burst off, necrosis, so the glycogen would be released. The glycogen is released. Now, what happens is certain bacteria present within the vagina will then metabolize this glycogen to lactic acid, and which makes the vaginal environment acidic. Okay, so certain bacteria will metabolize is glycogen to lactic acid. Okay. Means glycogen will be first broken down via glycogenolysis process. You will get the glucose residue, glucose to pyruvate, then pyruvate to you can say lactic acid via glycolysis and then anaerobic oxidation. Okay, so the pyruvate will be you can say reduced to lactic acid. That is really anaerobic reduction only. Aerobic oxidation is pyruvate to acetyl CoA. Then you will enter the Cori cycle if you know proper biochemistry. The lactic acid would then, in humans, it takes the route of liver, lactate dehydrogenase. It is again, you can say, converted into pyruvate, and the Cori cycle is then completed. Okay, lactic acid removal. So the thing is, when lactic acid will produce a lot, what will happen? The vaginal environment will be rendered acidic due to lactic acid. The vaginal environment would be acidic or not, right? And this acidic medium or the production of acidity in the medium, the production of lactic acid metabolize the metabolic activity of lactic acid. Okay, the lactic acid got produced by bacteria which were able to metabolize the molecule glycogen, and this lactic acids or the acidity perpetuated by the lactic acid's presence. Now, this acidic condition would retard yeast, that is fungal infection. So important. This will retard yeast, which is a type of fungus. So, fungal infection in the vagina. Now, if, however, a woman takes certain antibiotics, the bacteria can be killed, and then the vaginal environment can become more basic, which may lead to then various kinds of complications like yeast infection. Okay, the vaginal acidity also kills sperms. Okay, so the semen deposition into the vagina during the coitus will change the vaginal environment to a more basic condition and allows sperm to survive and move up the female you can say tract. Okay, now talking about the female external genitalia, if we talk about the female external genitalia, so the female external genitalia, it includes the mons pubis, the labia majora, the labia minora, the vaginal introitus, hymen, and clitoris. Okay, just write down the names: mons pubis, then you have the labia majora, then you have labia minora. Okay, then you have the hymen, then you have clitoris. Okay, and one more I missed. There is also vaginal introitus. Okay, vaginal introitus. So, in as far as the NEET examination is concerned, you should remember the 6 individual candidates that make up the specific female genitalia. Okay, female external genitalia. Now, talking about the mons pubis. So, mons pubis is a cushion of fatty tissue covered by skin and pubic hair that lies over the pubic symphysis. Okay, so that is the meaning of mons pubis. We talk about mons pubis. You might have seen the diagram in your book only. So it's a cushion of fatty tissue covered by skin and pubic hair that lies over the pubic symphysis. Symphysis. Okay. Now the skin of this area has many touch receptors and only a few pressure receptors. Okay, very very important. It has got many touch receptors but very few pressure receptors. Okay. So what happens is the distribution and the amount of pubic hair. It also varies in various individuals. Okay. So you can say that in about 25% of women, this pubic hair extends in a line up to the navel also. Okay. Now talking about the labia majora means major lips. You can say in Latin it means major lips. So the thing is, the labia majora are fleshy folds of tissue that extend down the mons pubis and surround the vaginal and urethral orifices. Okay. They are the fleshy folds of tissue that extend down from the mons pubis and surround the vaginal and urethral orifices. Okay. Now, these folds, they do contain fat, okay, and the pigmented skin has also some pubic hair, sweat, oil glands, and also has got few touch and pressure receptors, okay, or you can say fewer touch and pressure receptors compared to mons pubis, okay. You can compare this labia majora with the male scrotum, okay. So that can be compared easily. Okay, the male scrotum and the labia majora. Okay, so now coming on to the labia minora, again that means minor lips. So labia minora. These are paired folds of smooth tissue underlying the labia majora. So paired folds of smooth tissue underlying the labia majora. Okay. So they range from light pink to brownish black in color in various types of or various individuals. Now, in a sexually unstimulated condition, These tissues cover the vaginal and urethral openings, but upon sexual arousal they become more open. Okay, the hairless skin of the labia minora has got oil glands but no sweat glands, and again very few touch and pressure receptors. So it has got oil glands, no sweat glands, and very few pressure and touch receptors. Okay. So that is the constitution of the labia minora. Okay. In older women or in women who have very low estrogen levels, the skin of the labia minora becomes thinner and loses surface moisture also. Okay. It completely loses the surface moisture. Okay. It's always know for a fact that this is the way the things pan out. Okay. Now, if you talk about the vestibule, okay, if you talk about the vestibule, so the cavity between labia minora, okay, is known as the vestibule. Okay, the cavity between the, you can say, labia minora is known as the vestibule. Okay, so most of this cavity is occupied by the opening of the vagina, that is known as the vaginal introitus. Okay, if we talk about the vestibule, so vestibule is what? It is the cavity between the labia minora. Okay, now it is mostly occupied by the opening of the vagina known as vaginal introitus, covered by vaginal introitus. Okay, next is in women who have not previously had coitus, the introitus is often also covered partially by a membrane of connective tissue known as the hymen. The introitus is partially covered by a membrane of connective tissue called hymen. Okay, who have not had coitus or are virgin. But presence, or you can say absence of hymen is not a conclusive evidence of, you can say, coitus or the loss of virginity. Why? Because if you are a cyclist, if you are a gymnast, so due to those explosive physical exercises, the vagina may rupture. Okay, again, so that is not a definitive or conclusive or concrete way to term anybody as non-virgin if the hymen has been torn apart. Okay, now, but usually what happens is this tissue is often torn during the first coitus, so it can be accompanied by minor pain and bleeding. Okay, but as I told, okay, in any sudden fall, jolt, okay, can, you can say, or tear this hymen apart. Okay, and in some women the hymen is also can persist even after coitus, especially if the tissue is very flexible. Okay, so thus you can never say the presence of or absence of a hymen. Okay, so thus you can say that the presence or absence of a hymen is not a reliable indicator or of virginity or sexual experience. Okay, in very rare cases what happens is, this is a neat question, that a wall of tissue completely blocks the introitus. This is known as a condition called imperforate, means there is no perforation, no gap, no hole. Imperforate hymen. A wall of tissue wall of connective tissue completely blocks, you can say, the introitus. So that is known as, or that condition is known as imperforate hymen. Imperforate hymen. So the condition is present in about, you can say, 1 out of 2000 young women. And since an imperforate hymen can also block menstrual flow, therefore surgery is required mandatorily in order to alleviate this problem. Okay, so what you have is, now we'll be talking about the urethral orifice. Now, anterior to the vaginal introitus, or you can say ventral one in front, is the urethral orifice. Now, this is where urine passes from the body. Now, below and to either side of the urethral orifice are openings of two small ducts, okay, leading to the paired, you can say, lesser vestibular glands known as Skene's glands. Okay, so these glands are homologous to the male prostate glands. That is, the two glands or the two gland types are derived from the same structure of the embryo if you just analyze. Okay, and they secrete a small amount of fluid, and at each side of the introitus are openings of another pair of glands also. Okay, it is known as the greater vestibular gland or Bartholin's gland. So people just talk about the Bartholin's gland, they skip the Skene's gland. You have a greater, you can say, vestibular gland, you have a lesser vestibular gland too. That is very very important as far as NEET examination is concerned. You have a Skene's gland, you have a Bartholin's gland. So I'll write it down for you. So we talk about urethral orifice as a heading. So anterior to the vaginal introitus is the urethral orifice. Orifice means opening, okay, foramen. So a hole, you can say. Now this is where urine passes from the body. We know that. Now below and to either side of the urethral orifice urethral orifice are openings of two small ducts. Are openings of two small ducts. Okay. Now these two small ducts, they lead to the paired lesser vestibular glands. Lesser vestibular glands. That is known as Skene's gland. means gland. Okay. Now, these glands are homologous to the male prostate glands and secrete a small amount of fluid. Okay, you can just say secrete fluid. Now, one more thing I'll tell you is at each side of the introitus, okay, there are openings of another pair of glands. So this is present just below the urethral orifice, and the Bartholin gland will be present at each side of the vaginal introitus. Okay, so at each side of the vaginal introitus are openings of another pair of glands, okay, which are known as, you can say, the greater vestibular glands slash Bartholin glands. Greater vestibular glands, or you can call them Bartholin's glands. Bartholin's glands. Now, these glands, they secrete what? Bartholin's gland, they secrete mucus and are homologous to the bulbourethral glands of the male. Okay, they secrete mucus, and you can say are homologous to the bulbourethral glands in males. Okay. Now, what happens is sometimes Bartholin glands or Bartholin's glands can form a cyst or abscess as a result of infection too. Okay, so sometimes they can form cyst or infection or cyst or abscess as a result of infection too. Now we come to the next one known as the clitoris. It is known as, the scientific name is the glans clitoris. So the glans clitoris, you can say it lies at the anterior junction of the two labia minora. Junction of the two labia minora above the urethral orifice and at the lower border of the pubic bone. Urethral orifice and, you can say, at the left or the lower border of the pubic bone, and at the lower border of the pubic bone. So that is what happens, right? So next up is this glans clitoris is externally visible portion of the clitoris, or simply you can say the glans. Okay, not the glans clitoris, the glans you can say is the externally visible, the externally visible portion of the clitoris. Okay. Now, its average length is about 0.5 inches and it is about 0.5 centimeter in diameter. Length 0.5 inches, diameter is even lesser, that is 0.5 centimeter. Okay, 0.5 centimeter. So now what happens is, however, there is considerable variation among individuals or among various individuals with respect to the clitoral size. Okay, now the clitoral shaft, okay, contains a pair of, you can say, cylindrical tissue that fill with blood and cause the clitoris to erect slightly during the sexual arousal, and you can call it homologous to the male's penis, and that is known as, that spongy tissue is known as corpora cavernosa. Okay, the clitoral shaft contains a tissue. Okay, you can say spongy cylindrical tissue spongy cylindrical tissue that, you can say, fill with blood and clog and cause the, that fills with blood and, you can say, causes the clitoris to erect, slightly, you can say, during sexual arousal or during coitus. Now they are known as a pair of glands, or a pair of tissues present, known as a pair of corpora cavernosa. So at the base of the glans clitoris, the corpus cavernosa or the corpora cavernosa tissue branches and extends under the surface of labia minora. Now another spongy cylinder is present in the penis, you might not have known. It is known as the corpus spongiosum. Okay, which is not found in the clitoris. This tissue in the male is represented by the labia minora only. Okay, so the clitoral glands is partially covered by the clitoral prepuce, which is homologous, you can say, to a similar structure covering the glands of the penis, and the clitoris is rich in sensory receptors. Okay, so that is the thing. Now we switch our attention to the, you can say, mammary glands. Okay, so the mammary glands are also called breast or mammae. They are paired skin glands. They are positioned over the ribs, or you can say rib number 2 to 6 on the chest. Okay, rib number 2 to 6 on the chest. That is the position of the breast, the mammary gland. 2 to 6. Okay. Now their function is to secrete milk during breastfeeding, and they'll contain IgA, this secretory immunoglobulin, and they can also serve as a stimulus in case of coitus in both males and females. Okay. Now these glands evolved from where? During evolution, they have evolved from sweat glands. Okay. So milk is what? Milk, you can say, is a modified sweat only. Okay. So evolved from sweat glands. Okay. So you can call milk a modified sweat. Okay. So embryologically, the mammary glands are developed from a milk line, which is a chain of potential mammary glands extending from the arm buds to the leg buds of the embryo. Okay. So in some mammals, several pairs of glands, you can see, they persist in the adult female depending on the normal litter size. Okay. But in humans, usually a single pair persists only. But in some individuals, more than one pair are present. That is a condition known as polythelia. A condition known as polythelia. Okay. More than one pair of mammary glands are present there. Now, the male mammary glands are usually quiescent, but they are capable of growing and even secreting milk if properly stimulated by certain hormones. Now, such development of breasts in males is called what? You have studied class 11th endocrinology chapter. They are known as gynecomastia, right? Known as gynecomastia. Now, if we talk about the functional anatomy of the mammary gland or breasts, okay, functional anatomy of the mammary glands or breast. So each human breast is covered by skin and contains variable amount of fat and glandular tissue. Each breast is covered by skin and contains a variable amount of fat and glandular tissue. Okay. Now the variation in breast size and shape is, you can say, mostly due to differences in the amount of distribution of fat. Okay, that is mostly the thing, and also if the estrogen level has been secreted, you can say, in a very less quantity, that will decide also. But breast size does not affect the ability to secrete milk. Note it down, neat question it is. Breast size does not decide the ability to secrete milk whatsoever. Okay. Now, next step is you can also say that each breast contains glandular tissue divided into 15 to 20 lobes. Okay, and these lobes are separated by fat and ligamentous tissue. Okay, so the glandular tissue is divided into lobes. How many? 15 to 20 lobes. Okay, 15 to 20 lobes. And then they're separated by fat and ligamentous tissue. Okay, they are separated by fat and ligamentous tissue. Okay, so this ligament is not like the ligament that you have studied. Okay, more elastic fiber, less collagen fiber. So this is known as the ligamentous tissue here is known as the suspensory ligament of Cooper. Okay, suspensory ligaments of Cooper. Okay, neat question. This is very important. This provides support for the breast, but it tends to be less effective in older women. Okay, it provides support support to the breasts. Okay, now each mammary lobe is composed of several lobules. We have 15 to 20 lobes in a breast, and each lobe would be composed of several lobules. Okay, those lobules are again made up of grape-like clusters of mammary alveoli. Okay, so each lobe is made up of multiple lobules, and each lobule is made up of, you can say, multiple alveoli. So alveoli is not only present in the lungs, it is also present in our or in the breast. Okay, now the alveolus is the functional unit of the mammary gland. Always know this fact. Okay, the alveolus is the functional unit of the mammary gland. So each mammary, the what is called, I told you that the alveolus is the functional unit of the mammary gland, and it is a hollow sphere. Alveolus is what? It is a hollow sphere made up of milk secreting cells. Okay, it is a hollow sphere of milk secreting cells. Okay, so that is what it is. Okay, hollow sphere of milk secreting cells. So I hope you are able to comprehend today's lecture. In the next lecture, we'll delve deeper into the, you can say, the breast development and also hormonal control of mammary gland function. Okay, that will be taking into account, and also I'll tell you the risk of breast cancer development and the cure, and then we'll be directly taking or directly beginning or commencing the discussion on the menstrual cycle with negative feedback loops. Okay, then if you have had any doubts or queries, you can contact me on my personal number for my prompt reply.